Do you remember those days when you used this 8 ball, this magic 8 ball to get the answers to your questions? Like, does Tommy in science class like me? And the answer is most certainly. Well, this little magic 8 ball might have been fun when we were in middle school or junior high. But as parents, we have serious questions about things that impact our children. And that's what we're going to be talking about today on our new Ask an Advocate show. I am Charmaine Tanner. If we haven't met before, I'm a parent, a retired teacher. I also am passionate about helping each family make sure that their children are safe, happy, and learning each day at school. So as an advocate, I help parents in lots of different states with lots of different questions. So I thought it would be helpful if we dedicated the first Thursday of each month to be our Ask an Advocate show. I've gotten some questions already that we'll be answering today, and those are about such things as what does it mean, the difference between placement and location? How about the difference between certificates of attendance and regular diplomas? Or what do we see with medically fragile children and how they're being supported in schools? And also, we had a question about amending educational records. So those are questions for sure we're going to answer, but I'm also hoping as a live viewer that you're also going to be typing in questions. Kimberly's here, and Kimberly was one that asked one of the questions, so we'll be sure to address that. But even if you're watching the replay, type in the questions that you have because I can come back and respond to those later. So we are going to get started. If you are here with us live, say hi so I can welcome you. And if you also want to tell us where you're coming from, that's always fun to see parents from around the country and how much we have in common, right? So our first question is from Kimberly, and she was asking a question about placement and location. And there is a difference in this, and sometimes parents get a little confused. I think sometimes school districts maybe get a little confused about placement and location. However, what if we look at IDEA, which is the federal statute, and if we look at regulations, and we can, grasp some of the things that are said. However, we also need to know that we are not attorneys, probably. I know I'm not an attorney and I can't give you any legal advice, but we can glean some information from a variety of sources. So one of the sources that I wanted to show you, and Lissa's here, hey Lissa, is from Colorado. And it's their disability rights organization in Colorado. Now, each state has a protection and rights organization. Most of them go by the name Disability Rights in the state's name. I'm going to bring up an article from Colorado. And this is about change in location can be a change in placement. And if you're interested in the show notes where I give you these resources and a summary of some of the key points that we covered, just type show notes in the comments there. So I guess maybe, but before we go right there is the short answer of location and placement is the IEP team, which as a parent you're a member of, the IEP team makes decisions about the placement of the student. And when we look at placement, we know that the federal law talks about that students attend their neighborhood school, and that's like the first consideration. And give the student supports and services at that neighborhood school. So placement is talking about starting with the neighborhood school. However, there's this other part that deals with location, and that has been the school district's prerogative. That's not an IEP team decision unless your state has a different rule about it. But most states just follow the federal regulations and don't give parents any additional rights. So placement can be decided by the IEP team, which a parent is a member of. Location is something that the district can decide, and it doesn't have to be at a IEP meeting. Parent doesn't usually, a lot of times, get input into the location of the services. Now, we have had a variety of court cases and even a recent one that has talked about this placement and location issue. I know the attorney for the recent court case is going to be making a statement no later than May 23rd. So I've been kind of waiting for that statement before we talk about that particular case anymore. But know that we always have to kind of be on top of things because you never know when a school district is going to get some training and maybe start using a different interpretation of things. So Kimberly says that she would like the show notes, please. Yes, and Lissa has used disability rights in Idaho and that she's found them awesome. So let me go back to this document from Colorado. So let me show that. And in the show notes, I'll give you the link for these. So you'll be able to go back and look at them if you want. I'll bring down that. So in this, they talk about how some school districts and their attorneys say that a change in location of service delivery is not a change in placement if the IEP services remain the same. If the location change is not a change in placement, the service location can be changed without parent input or an IEP meeting. So that's the case when the district can make that decision without having an IEP meeting. But it goes on to say that sometimes there are situations when IEP services can generally be the same, but still a change in location will affect that service delivery, and therefore it could be considered a change in placement. So again, we need to just kind of be aware that there's going to be some continual discussion about placement versus location. I think as a parent, what I would suggest is that you always look at building your case for placement in a least restrictive environment, placement in your neighborhood school, building your case for that at the IEP meeting when you're talking about the child's strengths and how they learn best, when you're talking about your child's needs and their need to be with typical peers that have other models of behavior, communication, things like that. Because later at the end of the IEP meeting, when you talk about placement, you want to be able to have a firm case built from the very beginning of that document that supports, what you think is the most appropriate for your child. So let me know if this is helpful, Kimberly. So I know Kimberly said that her son is coming up for a triennial review in June, and the director has assured her that there won't be a change in the location, but now she's feeling a little bit uneasy about if that's really going to be true or not. So Kimberly, what I would suggest is to make sure that, if you can infuse inclusion in your goals, that would be another way to build that foundation. So when you come to the discussion about placement, you can say, look what we said the needs were. Look what the goals are saying. Look what the accommodations are saying. In order for my son to achieve that, he would need to be fully included like he is now. So, Kimberly, let me know if that's helpful, if you want some other clarification about that. And like I said, if you are interested in the show notes, I go back and look at the key highlights. Let me know, and I give you additional resources about the different questions that we're going to be talking about today. So just let me know. So the next question that I had was the difference between a certificate of attendance and receiving a regular high school diploma. Now, this is something that the federal law gives this decision-making to the state. So each state has their own graduation requirements from high school, and each state can decide if they're going to just have one high school diploma that everyone is able to receive at the end of high school, or if they're going to have different categories of certificates or different categories of diplomas. So one of the big things that you need to look at is when your child is younger and you're in IEP meetings and the school staff on the team start talking about alternative assessments for your child, alternative standards for your child, you need to make sure that you fully understand when you give consent for something like an alternative assessment, how that's going to impact your child. Because in most situations that I've been familiar with, it does put your child on a separate track. And so I think we know for a number of years that tracking and segregation is not best practice. And that's one of my concerns when parents give permission for their child to take the alternative test, because that kind of starts that path. Now, Toby and Jennifer that asked the question, they're from Alabama. So I did look up for Alabama. So let me share that with you. The other thing that you want to know is that each state has a parent training and information center, and they are great resources for specific state questions. I do work with parents in a number of states, like I said, so it is something that I try to always do is to, look up what the specific regulations would be for that. So let me see if I can bring up this other site here. So this is specific to Alabama. But if you are living in a different state and have a question about this, then you would want to go to your state department's website and look up exactly what information they share. And I think I'm doing the wrong one here. So I might have to pull this one down again here. The other thing that you need to know about if your child is taking alternative assessments that align to alternative standards, then another requirement from the federal law is that your child would then have short-term objectives also listed in their IEP under their goals. So short-term objectives are no longer required. As far as being in an IEP, I think they're a good idea. The only time that they are required from the federal law is when your child is taking the alternative standards or tests based on the alternative standards. So I know sometimes it's like, is this going to be clear? So this is a website, and I'll put the exact website in the show notes. But you can go to your State Department of Education website and you can type in the search box diploma or certificate of attendance, and you can get specific information. So that's the best thing to do. And also, like I said, you can also contact your parent training and information center. And it's like all these little things that are showing. So the next, and then I also wanted to give you a national resource, which is I'm going to look here so I make sure I say the right thing, the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition. And I will get you that. I think I've got that typed up here in the agenda. So let me look. So this is a national website that you can use. And it not only talks about things like diplomas and certificates of attendance, but it also talks about transition plans for secondary age students and what a quality transition plan looks like, the components that you need to have, the input that you and your child need to have in those meetings. So this is a really good resource if you have an older student. So that's good. And then we had a question about students that are medically fragile. And I was asking the person, let me see if she's on here. Hey, Judy. Good. Judy says hi. And she was the one that had asked the question about medically fragile children, because so often I think people don't understand that there's really specific needs for medically fragile children, that nursing services are a related service. So nursing services can be written into your child's IEP. And if they have, complex medical conditions, you for sure want to make sure that you have nursing services written in the IEP, that you have the type of services that are needed, the person that is going to deliver those services. I know I have friends that have a nurse that attends school with their children because they do have really medically complex situations. You want to remember as a parent that even if a nurse is assigned to your child, that they are most likely, the school's probably billing Medicaid for those services. And if Medicaid is paying for a service, it can only be for medical reasons, the child's health, welfare, not educational reasons. So don't let the district say, oh, your child has a nurse, we don't have to assign, any other adult support in the classroom, because for educational reasons, you still want to look at the supports that they're going to get for that. So Judy, can you type in what you were, because I know that you were bringing up the point about, often it seems, because I think there's not that many children that schools come in contact with that are really medically complex, that people don't have the experience. And so sometimes it's like, we're not sure what we do. I'm sure you've probably heard about the continuum of services as parents, and that sometimes, hospital services or homebound instruction, because of a child's medical condition, can be a place where they need to get their educational support. But we can also be creative. I know I have a friend, Yael Cohen in Denver, and she has worked with some districts where even though the child has to be at home because of medical reasons, the school bought this robot, and it sounds science fiction-y, but where the robot can be that camera and that lens into the classroom. So even if the student is at home, they can be watching and listening to the teacher. They can be listening to their classmates. They can engage back and, be a part of the discussion. So there's lots of things to be thinking of. And it always comes back to your individual child and what their individual needs are. but you want to make sure that a school doesn't say something like, oh, nursing services. No, we're a school. We're not a medical place. But nursing services are a related service. So make sure that you or your friends that you or people that you know understand that. And I'm going to see Judy. So here she says, doctor's orders in case of emergencies are lacking. Training of staff, including bus staff, is necessary to recognize when a child is needing medical help. Exactly. Such great points, Judy. Thank you for bringing those up. So as a parent, you want to make sure that you have your child's primary physician writing specific orders so the school knows what to do and what the protocol is going to be for your child in a certain situation. And then the other part is training for staff. But sometimes we forget that the bus drivers are with our children and they also need the training for, emergency situations. So in the IEP, under the supplemental aids and services section, you can write in there training for staff that are with your child, so that it can include teachers, paraeducators, cafeteria people, if your child has, a tendency for choking on food, the bus driver, if your child is riding a school bus. All of those people can be named in the IEP for needing training. The other thing that I tell parents is to be really specific when you're asking for staff training, because you don't want the principal to get some handout about, what to do if a child has a seizure and just copy that off and pass it out to everybody. That's not training. So you want to be specific about who's going to do the training. Sometimes it's the parent that knows best, right? When it's going to occur, that it's going to be ongoing, that it's not just one half-hour meeting after school. So there's lots of things that you want to look at when you write that training. But Judy, you bring up a great point that all those people need to be trained. And for sure that has to be happening. So if you're finding this show valuable and you know other people that can benefit from it, make sure that you let your friends know that the replay will be up and they can watch that. We're going to go on to another question that I had previously, but for people that are here, like Karen, if you have any specific questions, know that I want to be on here to answer your questions too. So we had a question from a parent about amending educational records, that there was an old record in her child's file from, elementary school. The child's going to be going on to, secondary school. And she felt like that old information, particularly one document, was really inappropriate and not, could be very misleading. So what you need to do is, if you think as a parent that there's any, documents or records in your child's educational records that would be considered inaccurate, misleading, outdated, you can give a written request to the district. So I would suggest that you would write to the special ed director, and you would request that that specific document be removed. The district needs to consider your request. They need to make a decision of, yes, we're going to take that record out, or no, we're going to leave it in. They need to give you a prior written notice, which we've talked about in other shows. So if you want more info about prior written notice, let me know. But they need to tell you, what your request was, what they considered, why they made the decision that they did, give you that in writing as a written notice. If they decide they're not going to remove the document that you're requesting them to, one of the things that you can then do is to request a hearing. And sometimes when parents hear this, it's like, a hearing, I don't want to go to due process. But this is not a due process hearing. This is under FERPA, which is the Family Education Records Privacy Act. And in the hearing, if the district still refuses to withdraw that document or record, then you can add a statement to your child's educational records. So you would type up a statement about why that document is misleading or inaccurate. And that statement has to stay in your child's records as long as that document that you're concerned with is part of that record. And if anybody would ask to see that document, they would also have to see the statement that you had, kind of like a rebuttal of why that statement is, or that document is inaccurate. So you can ask for things to be taken out of your child's records. It's not just kind of on a whim, like, I don't like this, but it has to be that if it's inaccurate, if it's misleading, if it violates your child's privacy or some other rights that your child has. So when you are requesting records, sometimes parents will do that before IEP meetings or maybe before filing a state complaint or something, and you're looking through your child's records. If you see something that you think is inaccurate, harmful, misleading, then I would say take action and take that step to ask that that be removed from your child's records. So let's see if we have any other live comments or questions. Like I said, we're going to be doing this the first Thursday of every month, where you can either give me questions ahead of time to answer, or that you can come on with us live or watching the replay and ask specific questions there too. As an advocate, I just always have to remind parents that I'm not an attorney and I can't give you legal advice. And so when I'm responding to answers, those are based on my understanding as a trained professional advocate, but they're not to be interpreted as any kind of legal advice, right? So again, if you just joined us, I will be kind of taking some summary key points from our show today, putting them in some show notes, giving you some more resources about the difference between placement and location, about the difference between certificates of attendance and diplomas, things that you need to have a heads up about if your child is medically fragile, and how you can amend your child's records. So let me know if you have any other questions right now. I also wanted to tell you that next Thursday, we're going to be doing a show about wrapping up the school year, because many of you just have a few weeks, right, of school that's left. And there's some gems of information at your child's school and the people that work with your child that we want to capture before the school year ends. So that will help next year's teachers with that transition. And your transition for your child will be smoother when we can capture the things that worked this year, realize the things that didn't work, and share that with staff for the fall. So that will be our show for next week. And I'm going to do, so here's Karen. So thanks, Karen. She said, I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the broadcast. How can I know that the classroom is being inclusive? Currently, my son's teachers and para are telling me exact opposite things about what is going on at the school. So yeah, Karen, that's really important. So one of the things that you can do is to sit down and have a conversation with the teacher and the para there. And you might also want to invite the principal. And you might just say, it's hard for me as a parent to get a real clear picture of what my child's day is like. So I would love it if we could just have a conversation about that. It doesn't have to be a formal IEP meeting. I think first you're just gathering information. So that would be one step, is to sit down and have a conversation with the people involved and have both the parent and the teacher in the room at the same time, right? And then the other thing that, you can do, depending on your daily work schedule, is to see if you can spend some time observing. Different schools have different policies. Usually they want the parent to give notification. And if you want more information about observations, you can let me know. Sometimes principals will say, because of the privacy of others, we can't allow you to go observe. However, that's not true. And so if you want information about that, but even if you don't observe directly in the classroom, but just get a feel for what it's like in the lunchroom, or what it's like when your child goes to special classes like music or art or PE, it can give you a good sense of the culture and the climate. It can, just by seeing where your child is seated, if it's a para that's always kind of Velcroed to your child versus is the para walking around and helping other children, does the special ed teacher go in there and co-teach? So there's two teachers in there working with the class. I think the other part of inclusion is that our kids aren't just guests and only go there for, maybe, the beginning of the day and lunch and specials or elective classes, but really to see what those core classes and what other kinds of parts of the day that your child is with typical peers, because that can make a huge difference, right? If they are just a visitor and kind of check in, they're really not being included. So, I think the best thing usually when you're getting conflicting stories is to be able to talk to people together, ask clarifying questions. Sometimes teachers can take, with cell phones, they can take, a quick picture of, what your child is doing for the math assignment and can text that to you. So there's ways that we can kind of rely on technology to find out what's really going on. And I can come back after the broadcast, Karen, and I can give you some links for some other videos that we've done about inclusive education. I think when teachers use the principles of universal design for learning, which means that everyone in the class, not just kids on IEPs, but everyone has a variety of ways that they can show what they've learned. The teacher has a variety of ways to teach that new concept, and that there's multiple ways that kids can really be engaged and motivated. And so when those three principles are there, all the kids are going to be reaping the benefits in that general ed classroom. So Karen said she wants the show notes. So yes, hopefully I didn't test my IEP bot this morning to make sure she was awake. And Lissa says that she has news and is going to message me later. Angela's with us. Hey, Angela. And Lissa is a member in our Trailblazer group. We have a monthly membership group called Parent Advocate Trailblazers. And if you're interested in joining us there, let me put up the link for that, because on these weekly shows, we can answer a lot of different questions. The nice thing about our membership, though, is that we can really take a deeper dive into your specific situation. So we have monthly Q&As in our closed Facebook group. So it's private, it's confidential just to that group. And we also have monthly strategy sessions where we'll dive deep into, a particular situation that a parent is experiencing with the school. And we also do trainings in our monthly membership group. And tonight we have our training on the least dangerous assumption. So let me know if you've ever heard about the least dangerous assumption. and what that means for our kids being supported and successful at school. And I'm going to check again and see if we have any other questions. So Angela says hello. And Karen says, you're so cool. Thank you. So sometimes, I don't know why these comments, there we go. But I think those are the questions we have for today. I will come back, and Tuesday morning is when I send out the show notes for the previous week. So if you are on my mailing list, you'll get those show notes. If not, you can let me know and I can make sure that you get signed up. But I'm excited that this is May and we still have weeks left, usually, to still make a difference for our kids. I know lots of parents are still having IEP meetings. I'm still going to a lot of IEP meetings with families. So I think, I hope that we can, kind of take that breath and feel positive and feel good about the changes that we're making for our children, because we see what a difference it makes when parents speak up and speak out for their children. So I am Charmaine Tanner. I'm privileged to work with you and to learn from you. Thank you for being with us, and we shall see you next Thursday at noon Mountain Time. Bye-bye. Next week, next Thursday. And it's like, are we ending? Are we really going to end? Yes, we are.